Hello, everyone. Welcome to another conversation in the stratosphere. It's been really, it's been a great year so far, and we're really looking forward to more people joining the Podium Connected community. And today I have the pleasure of welcoming Ari Marjamaa, from the CEO of Raa Labs, who's going to join us and we're going to find out all about what they do. Good morning, Ari.
Good morning, Mike. Good to be on.
Yeah, it's been a while. We've been talking for a while, so it's really great to. These things take a while to schedule. It's good to see you, and I'm really looking forward to hearing about Raa Labs and Raa Edge. But first, we like to kind of have a little bit of an icebreaker, and you can tell us a little bit about your background and how you got where you are today.
Great. So my name is Ari Marjamaa, and I'm, as you said, the CEO of the company called Raa Labs. I am, funnily enough, I'm a trained economist, but I'm still the CEO of a technology company, but I can come back to that story. I've worked with a variety of topics within the maritime industry, from academia to consulting to being part of a shipping company, and now sort of focusing on the digital and the technology side of this industry.
So how have you so really interesting, how does an economist get to be a shipper?
That's an interesting story. And way back, actually at the beginning of the 2000s, I was working at a research institution at one of the management schools in Norway. We were doing a large research project where we compared industry maritime clusters around the world. We actually ended up writing a book, attracting the winners. You might find it in a bookstore near you, but probably
see if I can get it on my Kindle.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And in that study, one of the things we noticed was that obviously at that point in time, Norway was still quite a clear leader in the maritime cluster space. And had a sort of very complete industry cluster. But one of the things we noticed was that we didn't really see a lot of players exporting competence. We saw a lot of the core services, we call it the basic elements of the industry, from equipment to vessels to actually delivering the shipping services. But we didn't see that many consultants or competence exporters that kind of leveraged the knowledge we had in the industry and sold that off into the world. So that was one of the things we talked about as the improvement areas for the Norwegian maritime cluster. And then, and I was quite sort of adamant, and I thought that was important because we had a competence that the world could benefit from. And then, incidentally, right about the same time, DNV set up a consulting unit, which basically were supposed to do exactly what we recommended that the industry should do. And at that point in time, it felt natural to put my money where my mouth was. So I joined that team. I was actually hired by Lasse Christoffersen, who's now the head of Wallenius Wilhelmsen. And jointly we set out to build this consulting unit, leveraging the DNV competence in a different sphere, working much more towards strategy advice, organizational development, business development, a very different type of consulting service from the DNV sphere. And that then led me on to working with a wide variety of companies around the world. And after that, I joined Wallenius Wilhelmsen, where I ended up as part of the executive team with responsibility for digital and transformation in the newly formed Wallenius Wilhelmsen organization. And then that again led me to realizing that there is quite a lot to be done on the digitalization side in the industry, and that took me to Raa Labs and establishing this company. So in a sense, it was the realization that there was something missing in the industry that brought me into it, and I've kind of been chasing that ever since, I guess.
I mean that's fascinating. I think from where we sit in the UK, the Nordics generally have done a better job of what you're talking about than many others, and it would be really interesting to hear your views on that regionalization. You know, who are the runners and riders? Who do you see as leading the pack at the moment, and who's trailing?
That's a good question. And actually, the project we were working on back then has been continued in the sense that Menon Economics, which is a Norwegian consulting firm, is actually doing an annual survey where they continue the work that we started back in the early 2000s. I think that's interesting reading because you see different areas are now popping up and the dynamics is changing a little bit. I think it's a much tighter field with more areas or more clusters showing strength than maybe was the case back then. Obviously, Singapore has become very much a natural hub in Asia. I think we see areas in Europe that are much more active now than they were sort of back then. But I still sense that the Norwegian cluster is one of the more complete ones and still thriving. So it's great to be sort of having a bit of competition from different areas and also have more areas that we can collaborate with. I think the industry needs it, and so I'm hard pressed to sort of point to one winner or one loser in that sense. I think it's there's a lot of great work happening around sort of around the place.
That's a very diplomatic response.
Yeah.
So okay, let's park that for a moment. I might go back there because I think I'd like to tease a little bit more out on that subject. But let's talk about Raa Labs and Raw Edge and what that's about and what problem are you solving with at Raw Labs.
I think where we began with the Raw Edge, which is basically our product, which is an IoT platform, a highly scalable, highly flexible, and modular IoT platform to get access to data from systems on board vessels and be able to use that data across any purpose or any platform or anywhere you like, basically. We came to that conclusion while working together with Wallenius Wilhelmsen when they started to formulate sort of their idea of how they wanted to use data going forward. And we saw that there was a sort of a mismatch between a lot of the solutions that were in the market that were typically single purpose solutions. So I have maybe a piece of equipment, I can provide some data, and then you get a subset of data from your vessel available in wherever you want that, which is typically in the application that the equipment maker provides. Mm-hmm. So you have a very nice single purpose solution that does one thing very well. The problem for an owner is that they typically have heterogeneous fleets, meaning they have different equipment manufacturers across the different vessels. They have different ages of the vessels, so the capabilities of the different providers might differ, different systems might differ. So in the end, an owner such as Wallenius Wilhelmsen or anyone else would end up with a lot of complexity that they need to resolve in being able to consume data from the vessels. So what we realized was that we needed to build something that solves that complexity across any type of system, across any type of vessel, and creating data as raw material that can be used for analysis and insight for a wide range of different purposes. This was clearly stated by the owners that we worked with from the beginning, but as I think in my mind, it's just been reinforced when you see the strong growth in the different types of uses for data and the different types of applications and the different ways that we will need to work with data going forward. So you could liken it a little bit to when you look at your keyboard, if a lot of the solutions that are out there today is a keyboard with 3 letters on it. Mm-hmm. So you can do K, L, M, and N, but you can't do P and O if you want. So what we're trying to create is a complete keyboard where the owners can access all the data. They can push all the buttons they like whenever they need that, disregarding of what their vessels look like or what they're going to use. So we're basically providing them with a full set of letters in sort of their digital transformation journey.
I think within the podium environment, we would very much recognize that philosophy, and I'll talk about a little bit more about that. But I assume that you had some sort of proof of concept, some kind of metrics. What can you tell us about what you actually delivered and the difference between, let's just say, a single noonday report and the environment that you're anticipating? What are the benefits? Why is it worth it for the ship owner who's traded for decades on noon report data? What are they getting?
Well, we're seeing a number of things. So one is obviously that, and I've used this sort of metaphor a lot. The noon data is fine, but the problem is that the noon data can contain a very high variability in your data, which over the 24 hours that it captures, which means that it's very hard to act on noon data. So the average for a 24-hour report might be correct enough, but it's very hard to understand what to do when you just look at the noon data. The other problem with the noon data is that if you have your feet in the oven and the head in the freezer, on average you're okay, but clearly you're not. So I think that variability within the data, within the 24 hours we're talking about, is really what the high frequency data allows you to tackle. For some purposes, noon data is perfectly okay, but for some purposes, when you start to actively work and actively look for ways to improve the way you operate your vessel, I think you need higher granularity in the data that you work with. So we see that the benefits are both in terms of the taking away manual activities on the reporting side, which is quite obvious that you have data available, making manual compilation less relevant. But primarily, it's about having the raw material necessary to identify how do we fix this, how do we operate better, how do we do this on an increasingly granular scale.
And you had some success with that.
Yeah. Sorry?
You had some success with that.
Yeah, we have, and I think we've seen owners using it for a different wide range of purposes. As I said, we started out with Wallenius Wilhelmsen. They have clearly stated that the digitalization is one of the areas they focus on going forward. They've identified and communicated, I think, something like 10 to 15% performance improvement that they have identified using the data from Raw Edge. And we have other owners who are using it as part of, from a little bit of a different purpose, as part of being able to provide to charterers raw material, which ensures the charterers that the vessels that they hire are actually performing as expected, making it easier to sort of support the reporting requirements that charterers have. So even if you're a tonnage operator, you don't really care that much about the operational aspects, just the maintenance side, then the value of data is still relevant because we're all starting to increasingly use it. So we see that having access to data in a simplified and standardized way is one of those building blocks that's sort of taking us into the future. Even we're working with equipment manufacturers who are using our solution to be able to provide data easily to their owners. So we have a very sharp focus on just the layer which relates to capturing data, structuring and distributing the data wherever the owner or the sort of the user of the data would like to have that. We don't do anything else apart from that. And the reason why we focus on that is because we can collaborate with companies like your own that do the job that you do much better than we could have done. So we are focusing on making it easy for you guys to succeed, and we're focusing on making it easy for the owners to leverage the best solutions out there. That's really what we want to do.
That brings me neatly onto the next question: is what difference do you expect joining the Podium 5 connected community is going to make?
Well, I'm hoping that so we're quite, I would say, convinced that we will find use for data across a wide variety of use cases, and that the industry will increasingly rely on sensor data as part of what they do. I hope that by joining the Podium community, we would meet like-minded owners who and users of data who are interested in accessing high-quality data in a standardized way, and that have, I would say, challenging ideas that would push us as well in terms of what kind of data we could provide and how to do that at that scale and so forth. So I think it's a way for us to reach a community that is quite forward-leaning in terms of how they think about data, and not the least to collaborate with some of the best players in the industry. So I think that's our hope. We really only provide the raw material for the value creation that happens further up. Mm-hmm. If the raw material sucks, then the value creation will be very poor. Yeah. So we focus very sharply on delivering high quality data, but we depend on someone like yourselves to sort of support us in creating that value. And that's why collaboration is really important for us.
I mean, I really liked your keyboard analogy, and I may steal that at some point, but or borrow it anyway. But from our point of view, we describe ourselves as a big picture company, and for us, Podium provides more pixels, and so the picture is better. When you're looking at performance, the picture's better, but that, of course, that does depend on the signal being good to start with. So I think we're certainly very aligned in our ambition, but we have great hopes for digitalization generally. So tell us a little bit more about your hopes for digitalization. What are the incentives, and perhaps more importantly, what are the barriers, do you think, to adoption?
And that's quite an interesting question, and I reflected on that prior to our conversation. That basically, for the last couple of decades, I've been working with the maritime industry on topics ranging from sort of strategy development, innovation processes, transformation, how to sort of move forward in this industry, and obviously leveraging technology and digitalization is just another topic in a long range of things that I've sort of focused on. And I think to me it's very clear now that as an industry we've got one major issue ahead of us. There are probably subsets of it, but the major issue we have is to move from a fossil fuel burning industry into a zero emissions industry, while maintaining our importance for the overall global supply chain. So that being said, I think there's a risk that we're falling into the trap of looking for the silver bullet solution. So there's a lot of talk about which fuel is going to be the right one. Mm-hmm. Obviously that choice is important, but it doesn't really help us in the short term, because the majority of the merchant fleet will continue to burn fossil fuel for the next 10, 15 years at least. It takes time to change the existing fleet. So while we need to solve sort of the big problem of which technology is the future going to be built on, we have a large opportunity to increase our performance today. And I think if you split it roughly, probably we can do 20, maybe 30% of the emissions we can reduce today using all means available, where data and digitalization is a crucial part of that. The remaining 70% can only be taken by actually moving to a different fuel and a completely different technology. But the 30%, if that's the right number, they are here today. We can do something about that as we speak. That's super important, that we don't get sort of hung up in this big question somewhere down the road while leaving the 30% on the table today.
I do sometimes wonder, having been in operations for a very long time, that I do sometimes wonder whether the industry enjoys talking about unicorns, rather than focus on the here and now and what we can do today. And one of my pet sort of hates, if you like, was that I think more than 10 years ago, there was a just-in-time arrival scheme. Excuse me, it was called virtual arrival, and it wasn't adopted. And I have one of those I fail to understand moments, because that required no technology at all. It was just a simple change in the way that we did shipping, that we did maritime transportation. And I do sometimes wonder whether it's, it's fun talking about unicorns. It's fun talking about, oh, we could have nuclear reactors, or I don't know, whatever, magnetic pulse, or I don't know, whatever you want to talk about. But I do sometimes wonder whether we that is a distraction, and we're just not focusing on day-to-day operations in the way that we should. And I think data allows us, there is sufficient data for us to do that now, and we could achieve significant efficiency gains simply by changing a few things right now. It's not all about new technologies, new propulsion, or unicorns.
It's probably the problem now is that it's about both, but you have to engage in both conversations. In my experience, one of the major challenges is actually, and this is maybe to some degree overlooked, but the maritime industry as a whole is a lot more fragmented than we maybe like to realize, both in terms of, if you go to SMM, for instance, when you look at the number of different manufacturers, of the plethora of players just on the equipment side is massive. And then when you look at the vessel ownership side, it's also pretty fragmented. So the consolidation, of course, in some segments is very high on the container side, but if you look to the bulk side, it's very low. So we are a much more fragmented industry than we maybe realize at times, which makes it a lot harder to create the drive for innovation, because there are many more sort of interactions that have to be fixed. And I think the symptom for me is that when everyone kind of points to whatever Maersk is doing, it becomes kind of the one player that we look to, and we should have had 10 Maersks or 15 Maersks that are sort of driving the innovation. I see some signs that it's becoming a little bit better. The various players are making interesting, innovative moves and so forth. So I think we're improving, but the problem is that it's a little bit too fragmented and complex, making it really hard to make schemes like you mentioned work, because there's so many stakeholders we need to interact with. And I think that maybe requires a slightly different approach to how we move it forward.
I'm certain that part of the skill for companies like Raa Labs and companies like and platforms like Podium 5 is the way that we deal with the complexity out there, because it's we can't wish for, well, we might wish for standardization, but we'll be waiting a long time for that. So, but the immediate need is to deal with that complexity and to deliver results from it. And that's what companies like yours and our platform are designed to do, I think.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and it's even though you can be impatient about moving forward faster, but it's still. I think you need to recognize that there is an educational journey to be had as well, to understand how to leverage data, what data really is. Just when we often talk about layers, so we are one very narrow layer in the technology stack, which is the way that you think about technology on land, sort of traditional. There are different layers and different players. In our industry, you typically buy a solution, which is a vertical solution that kind of covers all the layers. So we're switching that over to the side and saying, well, you want to choose the right layers. So you work with Raw Edge, you work with Podium, maybe you get some specific AI solution to do that, you get something to do that. So you can pick and choose and construct the best solution for your need. And I think that way of thinking is a little bit different and more challenging to understand. How do I do that? What questions do I need to ask? What do I need to do personally in my organization? What kind of skill sets do we need to build up? This is not just buying some piece of software or some piece of hardware. It's changing the way you think about how you operate. And when you look at the whole BI revolution that happened during sort of the last decade in the enterprise side, the fact that people started to have access to a lot more data in their daily operation, and they understood how they could use it. It wasn't just hidden within some ERP system. All of those things changed the way that you work with data. And I think we're seeing a little bit the same journey. And that's why we spend a lot of time with our customers trying to understand what is your need, how can you sort of solve it, what's important for the constraints within your enterprise to really get the value from it, because there isn't one solution that fits everyone.
Is there some advantage then in shipping being late to the party rather than early?
Absolutely, because everything has been invented, so we can sort of compile and construct and take things from other industries, but there are some elements that are very specific to our problem. And I think from our end, in what we see, it's obvious that we can't. So we have to build a solution, an IoT platform, which is extremely robust in isolation, because vessels are not connected to the internet at all time. So we have to build something which has a lot more redundancy in how it manages poor bandwidth and being offline for a long time and all of these things, which is to some degree a little bit specific for the maritime industry. But there's a lot of technology available we can use. There's a lot of examples we can learn from. And I think in that sense, we don't really have any excuse not to progress quickly, because the path is trodden. But the maturity and understanding of what does it mean for me, for my organization, is still something that takes a bit of time just to mature into it. And that journey is, I think, important to understand that you actually have to. It's like buying a new pair of running shoes. That does not get you fit. You actually have to use them. You have to use them regularly. So if you think about buying some technology in the way that you would buy a pair of running shoes, it's not going to deliver for you, because you need to actually use them, and you need to put it into the daily work and the daily way of operating.
So there's another great analogy that I may borrow, but so I got a final question there, just before I let you go. So if you could fix one thing, the top on your list, what would it be? What would change? What would transform the life of Raa Labs?
Well, I'm not sure if that's a good question. I don't really think that we need to change that much. We are on the industry as a whole is on a good path. I think we are progressing. We are seeing increasingly the need for transparency in terms of having access to data and the need to share data across. I think the whole drive now with the green financing is going to be an important sort of driver for actually showcasing performance, because if you promise that you're going to improve, then someone's going to have to see that you've actually done it. And also charters placing demands on having access to your actual performance data. I think those are drivers that are starting now to make the wheels move faster. So maybe the one thing that I'm slightly worried about is that the hype, that we stumble in our own hype, because there is a lot of talk about artificial intelligence and kind of silver bullet solutions which are easy and solves problems like this. I don't think they exist, because we are dealing with a highly complex, very, very challenging and a global industry that these are tough problems we are working with. But we have the tools, and once you have the commitment and you have the drive, they are solvable. But I don't think there are any silver bullets in the challenge we have ahead. So if we talk too much about silver bullets and simple solutions, I don't think that's to our benefit. So the hype tends to be maybe that's the unicorns you talked about. It's the easy big solutions that kind of fix everything. I'm not a great believer in those. I think hard work and commitment is really what will take us forward.
And that, I think, is a great point to stop this interview to thank you, Ari Marjamaa, for joining us in the Podium 5 Connected community and in our conversation in the stratosphere. And we look forward to going on that journey with you.
Perfect. Thank you for having me.